Good morning, Steph.
So, all right, let's get right to the meat of it with these Kevin McCarthy tapes. I mean, his denial could not be stronger that this absolutely did not happen. And here come the tapes, and there are more, right? So, obviously, the question we've all been talking about is, what is the criminal culpability? What does all this mean legally? Because clearly it's hugely embarrassing for him. And, I mean, but I would think it goes to the other conversations he did have with Trump on January 6th. Talk to us about your whole reaction to this.
Yeah, Steph, this makes my little law enforcement head want to explode because of the potential value to a criminal investigation of what we just saw disclosed in those tapes. Here's one of the most important takeaways from the parts of the conversation that I've seen reported thus far. Apparently, there are more tapes. But when you have Kevin McCarthy saying, and I wrote this down so I didn't misquote it, "This is one personal fear I have. I do not want to get into any conversation with Trump about Pence pardoning." Steph, what does that tell us? Inferentially, Donald Trump is probably talking a good bit about wanting and needing a pardon from Mike Pence. McCarthy didn't just pull that out of thin air as a major concern, a fear he has about the conversation he's about to have with Donald Trump about resigning. So that's just another reason why Kevin McCarthy must testify to the J6 committee, and more importantly, must be subpoenaed to appear before a federal criminal grand jury investigating Donald Trump's crimes. I mean, this is not rocket science. This is criminal investigations 101. When McCarthy says things like that about presidential crimes and about Donald Trump needing a pardon from Mike Pence, I mean, this has to be investigated.
And doesn't this go to what we talk about every week almost, is consciousness of guilt?
Consciousness of guilt, exactly.
Okay, so, but what is Kevin McCarthy? Does Kevin McCarthy have legal liability in this conspiracy?
Yeah, I think he should be investigated as a possible co-conspirator. He may be one of the spokes in Donald Trump's hub and spoke conspiracy to overturn the election. And that is what the Department of Justice should be doing. It's what they should have been doing for the past year plus. So, I can't say in a vacuum, based on what we know, is McCarthy guilty as a conspirator to commit offenses against the United States? There's enough evidence to investigate that.
Yeah. You tweeted, Representative Jamie Raskin says public hearings will show Trump launched a coup against the vice president and against the Congress. Again, where do you think they're at with getting Pence to testify, asking Trump to testify? Just talk to us about that whole, because I mean, now we have like both sides of this conversation, but the piece that's missing, right? There were people in the room with Pence, people in the room with Trump. Talk to us about that whole thing.
Yeah, I mean, in a perfect world, if I were investigating the case, I would want Pence to testify. But here's the thing, Steph. They have about 900 witnesses they've already heard from. So I'm betting they have everyone around Pence's or in Pence's orbit who has testified.
Yeah.
So here is the tactical decision we have to make as prosecutors. When we already have enough evidence to prove what Mike Pence didn't do, what Mike Pence knew, courtesy of other witnesses who were privy to conversations, it's a tough tactical call whether you call the one person who could undercut your case. Because Mike Pence, yes, he stood up for a minute and saved democracy by not giving in to Trump's corrupt demand to throw the election. But he also is a spineless, cowardly politician who still wants to curry favor with Trump's base. So if you call Pence, he might begin to undersell and downplay everything, even though everybody around Pence has already given up what the true state of affairs is. So in a strange way, if you call Mike Pence, it could almost detract from the power of the evidence of what Pence and Trump did or didn't do. And here's the other thing, Steph. I think the people around Mike Pence, like the Keith Kellogg's of the world, Mike Pence's national security advisor, are actually very loyal to Mike Pence and are probably way hacked off about what Donald Trump tried to do to Mike Pence, set him up to be hanged, among other things. And so they probably gave complete testimony, truthful testimony, in a way that Mike Pence himself might not. Now, all of those caveats said, I would probably still push for Mike Pence's testimony to round out the picture.
Yeah. Well, speaking of Raskin, he says the J6 committee, as you tweet, has evidence of crimes that have not yet been alleged. And the J6 report will be profuse in setting forth those crimes. I mean, even just based on today and what, I don't know, Liz Cheney may or may not have released, these January 6 hearings are going to be wild, right? I mean,
they're going to be lit. They're going to be lit. And you know what? I take great comfort in Representative Raskin saying things like, and mind you, he says these things being privy to what those 900 witnesses said behind closed doors, and what all of those cell phone records that they have, and text messages and emails and other documentary evidence. Jamie Raskin knows the picture that they can paint. And he said Donald Trump launched a coup against the vice president and the Congress to try to corruptly overturn the election's results. That's coming from a place of kind of informed knowledge. So I can't wait for the hearings, and I have to believe that they will result in tons of criminal referrals.
Bring Mark Meadows into this. You said they called Mark Meadows because they knew he was in the treasonous loop. The seditious conspiracy indictment could easily draft itself. You said in the sea of Trump and company's crimes, each corrupt drop tends to get lost. But before, during, and after the election, the chief of staff to the president of the United States took countless calls and text messages from kooks and crackpots seeking to overturn a presidential election. I mean, you've speculated before, and we don't know, that the reason why Meadows has not been indicted is because he could be a target. I mean, it certainly seems like he is dead center of this seditious conspiracy.
Yeah, not only a target, how can he not be seriously considering being a cooperating witness, flipping against Donald Trump? Because, you know, I would bet a buck, that's my betting limit, that he will ultimately be indicted if he does not come on board as a cooperating witness. And, you know, when you look at all the text messages, he really does look like he was running the switchboard for treasonous calls. You know, Hello, Mark Meadows here. How can I direct your treasonous call? Because he's got the calls from Don Jr., which is so, I mean, the treasonous bravado of Don Jr. saying before the election results are in, before the battleground states have been counted, he says, Daddy's second term must start today, before the people have spoken, right? And Mark Meadows indulges that, just like he indulges the text messages from that crackpot, Ginny Thomas, who uses as a basis of her claim that the election was stolen, that there are people being detained on barges outside of Gitmo awaiting their military tribunals for sedition. I mean, and Mark Meadows doesn't push back and say, Ms. Thomas, that's not true.
Don Jr., he's expected to meet with the January 6th committee, right, in the coming days. His appearance is voluntary after Ivanka and Jared's. Kimberly Guilfoyle, as we know, his girlfriend, fiance, whatever she is, also met with the committee for a second time. So, and Junior's texts are part of the ones that Meadows turned over to the January 6th committee. What do you make of this voluntary cooperation by Don Jr. now and others?
You know, I think he's trying to get in front of it. I think all the rats are looking to jump ship and hopefully land in a lifeboat, when I'm hoping they land in an indictment where they belong.
Yeah.
But here's the thing. I also believe that the J6 committee is giving the Don Juniors and the Ivankas and the Jared Kushners the opportunity to perjure themselves. They're setting perjury traps. Perjury trap is not a dirty term. All a perjury trap is, Steph, is you get the testimony of everybody around the people that you think did wrong. Then you let the people who you think did wrong testify, and you give them the opportunity to either tell the truth about everything or lie. And if they lie, you got them. You've got perjury, or more accurately, a false statement to a congressional committee, which is a 5-year offense. They're giving them the opportunity to tell the truth, and you're going to be perhaps okay, or lie, and perhaps you're going to have a whole world of hurt coming to you.
Speaking of which, as we speak, I believe Marjorie Taylor Greene is either, I don't know what she's doing.
She's in the courtroom. They're having some hearings.
Taking the fifth, not sure what.
But Ron Fine of Free Speech for People is now speaking to the judge.
Yeah. Terrified of the fact she has to testify on her oath today about the insurrection in order to stay on the ballot. What's your take on today?
First of all, a real hat tip to Free Speech for People, John Boniface and his whole crew, because they're free agent democracy fighters, just fighting for it, in the absence of DOJ thus far, fighting as hard as we think it should be fighting. I hope they're going to get there. But I so admire John and his organization.
Yeah.
And I think they have a good shot at, if we have a fair judge, I don't know who the judge is sitting in this case, but, there's a shot at getting her disqualified, because what she did, she participated in an insurrection, or at least gave aid and comfort to the insurrectionists. So she should be disqualified. I think you're going to see some of these suits. The one against Cawthorn was revived by the appellate court.
Yeah.
So he may end up being kicked off the ballot as well. These are important citizen initiatives that I'm thrilled that groups like Free Speech for People are undertaking.
Yeah. So let's talk in the same regard of Mike Lee. So Senator Mike Lee says the text messages he sent to Mark Meadows after the election don't signal advocacy for overturning the results. That's weird, because that's how they read to me.
Yeah.
He said his only goal was to figure out Congress's role in the presidential election and sort through the theories the Trump campaign pursued to challenge the outcome. He said he's known Meadows for a long time, characterized the text as having a level of informality that would be reserved for a friend. Just a friend that you happen to be wanting to commit sedition with.
Yeah,
right.
You say he's just a friend.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He knows that when I say things like, tell me what we ought to be saying, what I was trying to figure out was, what's your message? He knows me well enough to know that it doesn't mean I'll do your bidding, whatever it is. Oh, my God. I mean, first of all, it's taken him forever to he's been avoiding even saying anything, right? And that sounds pretty pathetic to me.
What's a little light treason among friends?
Right.
I mean, who among us hasn't? So here's the thing with Lee. He when you listen to that explanation, he doesn't do himself any favors, because he can't weasel his way out of this with his purdy talk the way he ordinarily thinks he can. When you read what he was saying, like, maybe if we just get a few of the battleground states to come up with alternate electors, maybe we'll have a path. Well, that's a recipe for overthrow. Express words in his texts and any more than John Eastman by calling his own memo about how to overthrow democracy, calling it crazy, is helping him any. I mean, we know what these men are. We know what these men did, and they all need to be held to account.
Right. I mean, it's like bailing out of any crime, right? Car theft, bank robbery in the middle, because you see it's going sideways and going, oh, I wasn't a part of that, when he clearly was a part of it. I mean, I don't know what, again, it takes to prove that legally, but those texts seem pretty damning to me.
Here's what it takes to prove it legally, Steph. An indictment and giving us an opportunity to stand in the well of a courtroom in front of 12 citizens in a jury box and make our arguments, because we can prove it.